Bam.
Hi, this is Danielle Gallant, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, I love it. This is fun. You have recently, and I love this, by the way. I love, and we were talking off mic about this, so this is just me repeating a little bit. But I love that in the modern times, we can have these conversations. Joe Rogan believes this. I believe this. I'd rather hear from you for an hour, openly talking, as opposed to because nothing here is prepped, right? The only thing I said is I want to keep this as positive, as we can, but we get to be critical of things too. So I love that we can do this. That we can sit down with people who are elected and you can talk to not only your constituents but the people who live in Nevada and just in general. Like, this is who I am, and if you're going to raise money and put your picture up and be famous, right? But let's hear about your ideas, how you do things, and describe to us what it's like to be a person who helps to run the government in the state that you live in. And by the way, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This is fun. I like this live venue. This is kind of, definitely tests the limits a bit.
Yeah.
So Nevada is interesting because we're a citizen legislature. So we're like very, very part-time. We only meet every other year on the odd years for 120 days. And majority of the legislators, they actually live in Clark County. So we all have to move up to Carson City for 4 months. And we don't get staff in the interim. So any constituent concerns that come to me, I have to deal with and try to pair them with the various contacts that I've made. And then when you're up in Carson, this is something I always find funny. Like, I get accused a lot of times of like being like, why haven't we implemented a tax or a fee for electric vehicles to pay for the roads? And I'll get accused of having an EV vehicle or something along those lines. And it's like, nope, I got to drive my own car. The government doesn't give me anything. And I only get paid for 60 days while we're up in Carson. So when I worked out my hours, yeah. So sorry, you're going to see my dogs in the background.
I like dogs. It's good. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So when I worked out with the hours, I literally make, or all of the legislators, they pretty much make about $1.25 an hour while we're serving in Carson. It's like not even close to minimum wage. So when we choose to do this job, it's because or at least for me personally, it was because I wanted to see some things change in Nevada. And I wanted to make sure that I could be part of a positive movement that would foster a really strong business environment, that would educate our children, that were safe communities. And those were things that I was starting to see slip away during 2020 and during the whole COVID apocalypse. So, it's a huge learning curve. I mean, one of the things that can be very difficult is that with us being a citizen legislature and we're really only like hands in, like really deep into it for 4 months out of every other year, the bureaucracies have a lot more institutional knowledge. And so we're sort of at the whim of them to a certain degree. So if they say something won't go, then we don't really have any way of being able to fight back against that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I live in California, everybody watching, and I used to sit on a county subcommittee for transportation. And because I wanted to do something. So I went to my mayor and said, hey, what can I do? And she's like, go sit on this subcommittee. And there were things that we had the ability to change. And you got to learn about the cities in the county and their problems. And my mayor was like, hey, I want you to do this. I want you to do that. And I'm like, I'm not able to do those things. These projects, you have to understand we're competing with the state, other counties, the needs of these towns. And my town where I'm from is called Benicia, right? I don't live there now, but that's where I'm from. And very established, very, very old city. Meanwhile, Dixon, this town, or Rio Vista, is exploding, right? And so they're trying to like, how do we get kids across the street safely? And how do we put traffic control in this intersection that was never designed to be this major intersection? Oh my gosh, we need money. And so we would try to work within these paradigms of like, oh my gosh, there's all these projects, they're all competing with us, and this one is about getting people across the street safely, where right now there's no control. And so it really opened my eyes to what was possible, what was not possible. And I guess the other thing is uh, if a city wanted our attention, and I sort of drove this on, and we usually voted unanimously as a committee, by the way, because we would hear it all out. We'd all say like, yeah, this is where we want to put our efforts and our influence, which is minor, but it mattered. Um, if you had a project, if Las Vegas had a project, or Paradise had a project, or Summerlin had a project, we're just using Vegas type towns and neighborhoods, and Summerlin didn't have the time to show up to our committee meeting, no, like, no, we have to understand we can't make an uninformed decision. And so we told the towns in our county, hey, you got to show up, right? And so there's all these influences, but the amount of change that we could make was we just nudged things, and only the things that we thought were important. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah. So one of the things I found interesting is that all these different bodies, whether it's a particular organization or an industry, or whether it's a particular municipality, because we're Dillon's rule in Vegas or in Nevada.
Okay.
So the state legislature says, okay, municipalities, you have authority, we're going to give you authority to do X, Y, and Z. So they have to come to the legislature to do a lot of things. So these municipalities have lobbyists. And particularly Clark County, it is the most powerful body in our state, probably to a certain degree, maybe even more powerful than the legislature. They have a bigger budget than we do. It is literally the hub of the economic center of Nevada. I mean, that's where all the casinos are. This is partly
Right.
a lot reason why we don't have state income tax here. So they all have lobbyists, and I feel like everybody's at the table. They make sure everybody's at the table, but I struggle because for me, I'm here to do the will of the people, to serve what's in the best interest of the people, and not serve what is in best interest of the bureaucracy. So one of the things that I saw a lot of times was that these lobbyists for these various municipalities, to a certain degree, were lobbying to maintain their power and maintain their control, but that wasn't necessarily what was best for the people that they are there to represent.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, because you guys neighbor California, like Washoe County has traditionally been empty. I mean, like there's just not a lot of people there. But now, because a lot of people are leaving California, they want to be California adjacent. A lot of people live in Washoe County, where they hadn't before. And so you also have these competing environments. Again, this is like my Rio Vista example. You're talking about places that are all of a sudden booming, and I'm not talking about Las Vegas boom and bust, but like the just the amount of people coming into Nevada, it's enormous, and it's hard to provision, and it's hard to get a 25-year ahead plan to build the schools at the right pace, and to think through what technology is going to be, and all these different things. It's very complex to try to run a state that is so attractive that there are millions of people moving to it.
And it's very transient. I mean, I think people are starting to grow roots more and more, but it's still very transient. And the other issue with Nevada that I think we saw like in 2008 when we had the housing crisis occur is that Vegas got hit hard, and one of the first cities to get hit hard. And then we were one of the last cities to recover. And so, because we don't really have a diverse economy, we're working on it. But we struggle with bringing more business here because we're 48, 49 pick a day in school ranking. And so it is very difficult for us to plan because we don't know when that next recession is going to be. And when that recession hits, it's harder for us to be able to provide jobs for people. And then the other thing, and I don't know if you had seen recently, Governor Lombardo had sent a letter to President Biden requesting to cut the red tape with the BLM land because we're landlocked, and BLM, they own like 80% of our state. I know. Well, it's kind of actually interesting. It made sense when we joined the union,
Sure.
because Nevada was this wild, wild west, and we had a lot of crime back in the day. And we needed help policing that so that we could create a safer environment for those small little towns that were starting to grow in Nevada. And back in the day when there wasn't water, you didn't have people. Now
Yeah.
it's a little bit different, and our infrastructure is a lot better, and so we have ways of utilizing that land, but we actually turned over a majority of that land to the government, like the federal government, so that they could police those lands. But now they're like, I joke, it's like Golem from Lord of the Rings, my precious,
Mhm.
they don't want to let it go, it's that precious ring, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're selling, these an acre at millions of dollars, and so our developers cannot make the numbers work out for available and affordable housing, so
Yeah.
that we can deal with our housing crisis. So Governor Lombardo requested that POTUS roll back some of that red tape, give us some of our land back so that we could address this housing crisis.
Hmm.
So hopefully we'll have some success that way. But there's a lot of constraints that we have at the federal level that make things very difficult for us.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot in that BLM thing and in the development. I lived in Vegas in the mid aughts, and primarily because I was in Iraq working as a spy, and so I didn't want to pay California taxes when I wasn't even going to live there, and so I'd moved. So my residence was in basically in Henderson, Trop and Pecos. That was my little spot where I was at,
Uh-huh.
and it was interesting to see. So I tried to buy a house, and it was pre-bubble bursting for the housing market, and I'm like, this is dumb. Like, this is not going to make sense. What they wanted to charge me for interest and everything else, and so I was part of that. People, I'm like, I'm just walking away. Whatever it cost me
Yeah.
is minuscule compared to what the house was going to cost me. And there's all these challenges that are there. You talked about the mixed economy. People think that Vegas runs on people gambling. Is a big piece of it there, but you've got worldwide entertainment at a level that nobody always thought about. Like, Vegas is a cultural mecca for anybody. If you dance, if you sculpt, if you build gardens, I mean, it's incredible. And if you come up with impossible things, where are you going to go pitch that idea except for Vegas? But how do you get enough water? One of the things I know about from being on the Strip is that as the Strip gets bigger and there are multiple 5,000 room hotels and plenty of 3,000 room hotels, how do you move all the waste off of the Strip and out to being processed? And where do you put those processing plants? Because when's Vegas going to stop spreading out? There's so many things that you guys have to account for. It's amazing when you try to plan an exploding environment, like in terms of population growth and business growth, because at some point that has to collapse back in on itself and then blow out again, because Vegas is so attractive.
It is, and Vegas has done a good job with our infrastructure. Everybody worries about, oh, Vegas is going to run out of water, and so, and I always tell everybody, in the last 5 years, we've grown exponentially, but we are using 25% less water than we were 5 years ago,
Wow.
because we have
Yeah.
this amazing recycling system. So anything that goes into a drain gets recycled. But don't tell my kids that, because when they're running the tub and the shower, I'm always like, don't waste water. um,
Yeah.
so I think we've done a very good job with that. We do have a good, I mean, you're right, like we've done a good job with our sewer plants, but then how far out do we go?
Right.
But we seem to have hidden those pretty well. And a lot of the hotels, and I've done some cool tours, is that they've got like whole recycling systems, filtration systems, even like mini power stations at the base of their hotel, where they're almost
Yeah.
like, you know, just fully functioning on their own, which has been really good.
Yeah. And I guess the point here is that it's complex to build a city as it's exploding, but it's already there in this prime way. I mean, Vegas, yeah, America has some crown jewel cities, and I think Vegas is one of them. Where I call it a worldwide city because people come to Vegas from all over the place. And when I lived there, it was like every 8 minutes, like 1,000 people arrived, or whatever the number was. It was ridiculous, and you could just. I lived in the flight path, so I could see like plane, 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 just zooming in, zooming in. And it's only gotten bigger. You guys will be pulling in 50 million people a year to that one little hunk of strip. You guys will be doing that in fairly short order. Now, not tomorrow, not next year from now, but 50 million people, that's a lot of people to provision. And they're also transient.
They are. And I mean, I got on your radar because of the whole A's videos and tweets, right? And, Allegiant in 2022 was listed as the most profitable stadium in the world. And there was the same arguments against Allegiant Stadium 5, 6, 7 years ago as we're hearing for the A Stadium as well. I mean, literally, it was no stadium is profitable. Look at all these other states that have lost money. The Raiders are a horrible team. The owner treats everybody terribly. I mean, it was just on and on and on. And I'm actually from the Bay Area. So I grew up in a town called Orinda. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Exactly,
I know where Benicia is. Okay. Yeah. But my husband and I lived in a town called Brisbane, which was between South San Francisco and San Francisco. So we had to deal with the Oakland Raider riffraff because it was all right there at Candlestick. And it was definitely a little bit of a rougher crowd. So I had apprehensions with the Raiders coming here and what that was going to bring to Las Vegas. But we heard the same arguments last, with the Allegiant as we're hearing with the A's. And the thing that nobody factors into is that Las Vegas is a very different economy, and having people just want to go see stuff. Like, oh, let's just go check out an A's game, or, oh, there's going to be this huge entertainment district around it, which is actually what's going to pay for the bonds, right? So every time you utilize a restaurant or who knows what other activities they're going to have down there, there's going to be this added tax that goes to paying the bonds. Just like with Allegiant Stadium, we had the room tax. Tourists paid for that. I mean, it was it's just crazy. So, and, particularly with the A's stadium, one of the things that I was pretty proud of is that I brokered the deal between Neon Museum and the A's stadium. So that was contingent on my vote. If the A's wanted my yes vote, and this was the only time up in the session that my vote really counted, I needed to know that they were going to broker a deal between the Neon Museum and the A's and incorporate the neon signs into the stadium. It took them a little bit, but once they kind of understood the value of what I was offering, they glommed onto it. And so we're going to have neon sign museums throughout the stadium, which are the history of Las Vegas, right? And then the Neon Museum is also going to have a small satellite museum within the stadium. And then they are in the process of negotiating a better location that's closer to the strip for people to enjoy as well. So, I mean, people are going to want to go see the signs. They love doing that. Or they're going to want to go and have a meal. Or we're going to go and have maybe watch a game. Or we'll probably have concerts at the A's. Yeah. And so it's going to be used on a multitude of levels. And people are just going to want to go check it out. And so that's why, Las Vegas is just a different economy. It's just a different beast.
So there are some things that I wonder about. And again, I've been a Las Vegan. I was the Captain Morgan model for Las Vegas when I lived there, among other things. I worked for the Greenspuns. The Greenspun Media Group is a fantastic partner for the Strip and the way they promote these things. And it used to be that the Neon Museum was largely a boneyard, right? Now you're getting that thing out of being this, these are derelict signs that we're not going to get rid of. They have value, and you're integrating it within the stadium. I think that's fantastic. I mean, that makes that stadium neat. I've talked to a bunch of my friends from the Midwest, and I've said, what are your thoughts on the A's now these guys are in sales, but they're like, hey, I'm going to take my clients who are in Cleveland or in Chicago, and for sure our company will buy a box, and for sure I will take that person out there, because when it's cold as hell in Cleveland, they don't want to go to a game. They still love the Indians, and here like the A's should open the year with a month-long homestand and just bring all these other towns in, and all of a sudden April is a time to be in Vegas because baseball is beautiful, and it is a different economy. It really is.
Yeah. And April is gorgeous here. I mean, fall and spring is beautiful. Yeah, summer's hot. I get it. We spent a lot of time inside or just hanging out by the pool. And winter's not really that bad. Like it can get cold, but it's still comfortable. So I think people just underestimate how much Vegas has to offer. And I always joke, like, gosh, Vegas is sunny 366 days a year. And it's like rare that we have, and even if it does rain, it's for a couple hours and then the sun's out again. So,
and it's not the kind of rain that gets you wet. It's just the kind of rain that, just like it's drop. It's almost like there's like a rain cover over the city. It's interesting. I wanted to, before we all lose track of this. Go ahead. Yeah, we have
monsoons, which are amazing.
Yeah. I don't want to lose track of this. You lived in Brisbane. One of our favorite restaurants on this show is in Brisbane. It's the 7 Mile House. I don't know if you and your husband ever went there, but what a great place that is. Yeah, it's a great place. And not a big town. For people to even know where Brisbane is pretty rare. So I wanted to make sure we made that point about Brisbane. Do you want to say anything about Brisbane, or should we move on?
Listen, we really enjoyed living there, and it gave us our start. So my husband and I were able to purchase the house in 2010 when everything tanked, and we really wouldn't be able to be where we are today if it wasn't us like scrimping and saving to be able to buy that house, remodel the house, sell the house, move to Vegas. So Brisbane has like a really sweet spot in my heart. It was funny when we sold the house, my husband goes, "Do you have the keys?" I'm like, "I haven't seen the keys in 5 years. I don't know. We never locked the doors."
Yeah.
So we had to change the lock so we could give him some keys.
That's hilarious. I want to go back to look, and I'm from Oakland. I was born there, and my dad lived there, and my dad lived in East Oakland too, so not like the gentle part of Oakland. And so I know Oakland, and I get to be pretty hard on them. But when you look at cities compete, they compete for assets, they compete for notoriety, they compete for federal money, all these kinds of things. It is a competition. And if your city is better than another city, it is attractive and people will go there. Nashville is booming. Why? Well, they've done a lot to be able to boom. Vegas is just like that. You guys have picked up F1, you've picked up the Sphere, you've picked up the A's. That was all within a year, right? And when you look around the nation, if you're going to do something big, if you're going to try to, you're not going to do that in Oakland. God bless. Like, Oakland is great. It's got its own thing and everything else, but Vegas competes hard nationally, internationally for, if you're going to do Chinese New Year somewhere in the nation, one of the places you're going to go do it is in Las Vegas, because it is packed to the gills and it is a great time.
Yeah, it is. And particularly in the Arts District, they have a huge Chinese New Year event, and which is a really cool part of Vegas. If you haven't, because it's been a while since you've been here and it's really developed. But I mean, you're right. Like, listen, I grew up in Orinda, which I know is not Oakland, but it bordered the Berkeley-Oakland hills. My mom grew up in Berkeley. My husband and I lived in Alameda for some time. And that was 16 years ago that we lived in Alameda. And there were times where we could not get home because we couldn't get through Oakland to get to the bridge to get onto the island because there was riots. And, we had friends that lived in Oakland in these really nice, communities, like, smaller homes, but kind of those row houses. And I don't know how many times my husband's truck got broken into.
Yeah.
If, we stayed there late or something like that. So,
Yeah.
and so I'm not saying like all of Oakland is this horrible place, but there's been a lot of, it's been happening over a long period of time. I was seeing it when we lived there, where there was just a constant erosion of safety and a constant
Mm.
erosion of not being like a business focused and big business friendly community. And I think the A's have gotten to the point where nobody was really showing up to their games. It wasn't a welcoming place to bring your kids and your family and to go. I mean, it's so bad now that like Fisher, like the entire executive team and the ownership cannot go to the games because they have death threats. So they can't go to their own games, but then the fans like come down on them for not showing up to the games, but it's not safe. And to the point where I think somebody told me it was like the CFO, somebody within the organization, she lives in Danville, and there was some crazy fans that showed up to her young kids' elementary school and were threatening her kids.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
actually
That's
have to
crazy.
have bodyguards. So like when you look at this, it's like they haven't really been treated very well, regardless of what the differences are. Have discussions, disagree with them, but don't threaten their lives, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
line. So at this point, the A's are like, Vegas wants us. We know we'll be able to like pack those stands. They're going to work with us. They're going to value our commitment and us being part of the community. Like, yes, we want to be there. So, and I think it all just has to do with how you treat your business partners. And we don't mess around with the Strip. I'll tell you that much. Like some people have been saying like, oh, you better watch out for Fisher. He's gonna, and I'm like, listen, like the Strip is our livelihood. So if we start seeing somebody erode our ability to be successful on the Strip, there's going to be a conversation and there is going to be a quick correction.
This is a big deal because, we have to be fair on the other side of this. I totally agree. Oakland has not been a great business partner. Their biggest taxpayers are all government entities, right? And so you have Oakland and the A's and the community, and they just couldn't figure it out. They tried for decades, didn't work. And the team has always been on the edge of moving. When the Haas family sold, they said, hey, we sold this thing at a loss and also a financial loss for us. Like there's a quote from Haas Jr. talking about that. So they did that to keep the team there, but you're selling something that if you keep it, that the business owner is going to have to do something to try to fix the problem. And it's very hard to get fans engaged in two things in California because it turns out there's a lot of things to do. But we also have to look at the current ownership and say, hey, you have a responsibility. You've got this great location on this Strip. We can't have you messing about. Like you need to do your job. And I know you talk about the conversations, and you and I both know like there's a lot of things that happen in Vegas that are done by people that have a lot of power in Vegas. And so how do you hold John Fisher at all accountable so that they're doing what they're supposed to do? It's one thing to say it, but what does that look like, that accountability?
That's a really good question and not going to be part of my purview.
Yeah.
I mean, that really rests directly on the stadium authority for the A's, and Clark County. So there's going to be a lot of pressure from both of these entities to make sure that the A's are successful and that they follow through on what they say they're going to. And look, like there's a long-term reputation that's very important in Las Vegas. Like Nevada is a very small town. No matter how you slice it, it is a small town.
Right.
And there is like a core set of lobbyists that have built their careers and their reputation here. And regardless of what you think about lobbyists, there are some good guys out there. And they've staked part of their reputation on the success of the A's. And they're not going to let them fail. And I definitely seen a very different strategy in terms of what the lobbyists have been telling the A's to do here in Vegas versus what's been some of the policy and strategy with the Raiders. I think, and listen, the Raiders have been a great community partner. They do a ton of stuff for the surrounding area. But there has been some things that people said, yeah, like that could have been done better. And what I'm seeing the lobbyists for the A's do, saying, okay, we're going to do it better.
Right. It's just no different than F1. F1 came, did the impossible. You guys and them partnered to build this incredible track. I watch F1 all the time, and you guys put on the show of the year. All the fireworks going off from the top of the casinos. It's incredible. However, there are some things that have to be done better, and you guys as a community are working to try to help out those smaller and middle-sized businesses that paid a cost for them to be there. And so you are learning with that. And I'm glad to hear that the A's and the lobbyists and everybody are trying to sort that out. I wanted to bring in also I don't think there's a better Visitors and Convention Authority than the LVCVA. I hope I got those letters right. Because those guys, man, when I worked as Captain Morgan, I got hired to go do things. I got hired to come in, and I'm just one dude in a costume, but I got hired when appropriate to go do things within that. Their reach, their marketing, their ability to compete with other cities to get conventions brought. Oh my God, that's a machine. And from what I've seen of them, they'll be a great partner for the A's. But again, they don't sell season tickets, and so someone has to do that as well. So, and I think there's room to be cautiously skeptical, like, hey, are you guys really going to do your part? So I'm going to shut up and get out of your way. And then at some point, I want to get beyond the A's because there's a lot more to talk about.
Was there a question there?
Yeah, well, just in general, yeah, there is. How does the LVCVA partner with businesses in general, and try to accentuate business? They're a business partner. They bring people to the Valley so that, instead of them going to Miami or to whatever Oakland has for a convention center, right? Anaheim is one of your guys' prime competitors, right? I live too far from Anaheim at all. We could put 100,000 people in our little convention center by Disney, right? And so the Las Vegas Visitors and Convention Authority, it's powerful.
It is. And there's a lot of pressure, and they're good at doing it in terms of packing in all of those conventions almost every weekend. It seems like there's somebody else here, right? Or there's some other event going on. And I have a lot of friends where they've got like 9-to-5 jobs, but they also have these weekend jobs that, because they might serve or bartend or something like that, because on the weekends they can make a couple $1,000s, and it's, March Madness is happening. Oh, we've got, the car convention or the tech convention or the builders convention. And so, and with that comes a whole other set of industry that people don't think about.
Right.
So, right, to build out each of those little stands and venues that people are advertising within the convention, that's an industry right there in itself. These temporary houses or booths that they make. So that brings like another like level of people as well. And then when people come to Vegas, they want to party, they want to gamble, they want to go see the shows, they want to drink, they want to eat, they want to have fun.
Yeah.
And they want to pack it in as much as they can. And so it packs up the casinos, it gets those rooms rented out, it gets those restaurants filled, it gets those poker tables filled, it gets people to the Raiders game. Like, oh, let's do a convention, and then we'll also go and see a game, or we'll go see this show. So it's all very like this very symbiotic ecosystem that it works. And that's one of the reasons, though, is that when you've got a recession where there's not expendable income, when you've got COVID that shuts everything down, or during in the Obama era, he actually kind of scolded those corporations for having these lavish, weekends and whatnot in Vegas. It hurt us. Yeah. I mean, it damaged millions of lives when that happened. So Vegas is sensitive. not like hearts
Yeah.
in it, but like just these little market factors and influences can really hurt us.
Yeah, I remember when that happened, and it was a big deal. I had just left Vegas because I saw the kind of the crash coming, and I had an opportunity to go somewhere else, and so I did. And when he said that, I thought of all of my friends that did things, whatever it was on the strip. And when I would talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, it is tough right now."
Yeah.
And you're running a life based upon a level of income that seems very sustainable. These are not risky people, but all of a sudden the economy tanks and the president badmouths your industry in your city, and people go bankrupt
Yeah.
from that. Just that quick comment turns into something big for you guys.
It was awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the problems, again, we're talking about like this, the city is, and the state in general is exploding. Like if you go to Texas, Texas is growing because not only are there cranes and building buildings, but there's heavy highway construction. And this is stuff that takes planning and time. The ring route around Vegas is, I think it's done now, but you're going to need another one, even further out. And so as you guys, and traffic, good God, traffic is horrible in Vegas. I'm not complaining. It's a reality that it's hard to get around. So when you look at these things and when you talk to your constituents, traffic has to be one of their top concerns. Has to be.
Yeah. Sorry. The
It's all
girls
right.
see something at the front door.
We like dogs. It's all right.
I do. Well, they're all rescues. So we're all going through certain amount of training program, but they're
Yeah.
older. So
Yeah.
it takes us a little bit more time to get through the training. So I apologize.
Yeah. It's all right.
Traffic has gotten worse since, because I moved here, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And traffic has gotten worse, but what I see is that we have to go through a certain amount of pain in order to get some relief. And so right now, I-15 is awful because they are doing massive construction, and it's a couple miles construction, then it's open, and then another couple miles. And so it is just bottleneck. Which has made things really bad. 215, which you were talking about, the loop, that's done. We're good on that right now. So it's that 15 that's really in that spaghetti bowl. That's really kind of a struggle for us. Let me take that back. 215 just out on the west side of 15 is doing a little bit of construction, but it's not as bad as 15. So we get a lot of complaints about, yes, like the traffic's horrible, but then that goes into my earlier comment where like we're kind of struggling on funding to be able to fund these projects that we need to do, because 3% of the vehicles are EV, and we've lost out on that gas tax with those vehicles. And when we have such a bare minimum budget, that 3% is a big deal to us. But we can't, honestly, I can't get the Democrats to agree to even allow that bill to get a hearing. It's been introduced a couple times and it never sees the light of day. And I know I'm on growth and infrastructure. I never saw that bill. I never had to prepare for that one. And I think Vegas is a little bit behind the times on public transportation. Growing up in the Bay Area, BART was fantastic. And at 13, I was taking it from Orinda into the city, get off at Powell Street, right? At that Nordstrom's, which is now shut down. Walk up Post, and go hit the Olympic Club and go swimming, right? I swam for the Olympic Club in San Francisco. My 13-year-old couldn't take BART now, and there's areas where it's dangerous for younger generations, but I digress. So Vegas doesn't have that public transportation, and so we don't have a way of being able to ease some of the congestion. The bus system is not great. Like up in Anthem where I live, I've got a huge 55 and plus community. And they would love to be able to have some access to public transportation, and there is none, zero.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be a little bit more, and I don't know how it'd even be paid for, again, because we are on a very tight budget. But I do think we need to start taking a look at some options, because my car insurance has skyrocketed here in Nevada. Like, I mean, to the point where I'm like, gosh, do I need to take out another mortgage to be able to cover the car insurance? And partly is, because we not only are we the entertainment capital of the world almost, we're also the personal injury attorney capital of the world, and so there's a lot of personal injury attorneys, and it's driving up our insurance costs. So there was a cool bill I heard. I love this idea, where it's like an self-driving vehicle. So you have an app and you have a subscription, and you call the vehicle to where you are. It picks you up. You then personally drive it to where you need to go. And then when you get to your destination, you say to the app, like, I don't need the car anymore. And it automatically drives away, so that I never have to park. I never have to worry about, insurance, paying for parking, finding parking, taking up space for parking lots. I thought it was a very innovative way to look at driving, like thinking like, what if we just didn't need cars anymore?
Right.
We just had a subscription to a car service. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Or at least within the city, right? You park in some, major complex off the strip, and then, summon your car and then drive into town or get dropped. Yeah, whatever. I think that is incredible. I'm curious what your thoughts are, because people move to Vegas for a number of reasons, but a lot of people move there because, hey, there's no income tax and that's going to give me a raise, So when you guys write bills, it's got to be tough to figure out because if you keep blaming on the tourists, you're going to hit that pump too hard, and the tourists, if they all of a sudden they stop coming, it just costs you money, right? You have less tax revenue, so you have to be mindful of that. But also, if you say, hey, we just want a little taste, a quarter of a penny, or whatever it is, I bet people would lose their shit and be like, that's not why I moved here. And so, because nobody ever wants to pay more taxes for like things like freeways and stuff, right? But at some point you have to, like, hey, we've got to buy asphalt. Hey, we've got to buy concrete. Someone has to pay for that. And you can't just go to the tourist well. So how do you find ways to pay for things?
So our sales tax is one of the highest in the country. So that's one way we hit mining really hard. And so those are our two big, and then we have property taxes. And then under Sisolak, during the recession, they implemented the largest tax increase in the history of Nevada under a Republican governor. So that's always been a little, stinging point. They did the commerce tax. So anything that you gross over 4 million gets taxed. So like Ahern, everybody knows Ahern Rentals, right?
Sure.
Man, he was pissed. And I mean, eventually, just recently, I believe he sold Ahern. I think he's sold the hotel, if he didn't, or is in the process. And I think he's gone to Florida.
Wow. I'm out of here.
Out. Right. And I know our governor wanted to raise the floor for the commerce tax to 8. I tried to work a deal on one of the bills to get it to 6, but it didn't happen. So we have some pain points, but you're right. Like, doing a state income tax would really piss everybody off. I mean, just we would freak out. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I've got some people that want to increase property taxes even more, but we've increased it to 8% on rentals, and it's capped at 3% for owner occupied. But then that creates a whole other issue, because now I've got people screaming that rents are too high and they want to implement rent control. I'm like, well, when you put a 3 or an 8% property tax on these properties, And now you've also like extended the eviction process, because when I moved here, it used to be 2 days, or excuse me, 2 weeks. Now I'm
Okay.
like 4 to 6 weeks. And so when you do that, and then when you also add all these like extra regulations, it and the HOAs are increasing because inflation's increasing, like it just keeps getting compounded where the rental community and those advocates for rent control forget you need landlords in order to have places to rent. And
Yeah.
if you chase off the landlords, you're not going to have any more rentals. So what's the balance? Yeah.
I know he's passed away, but a guy in San Francisco, he owned a multi-floor tower that had a good number of, for being an individual, a good number of residences in it. And he ultimately got sick of it. And so he's like, I'm going to live in the top floor. And San Francisco said, well, you're not going to be able to rent anything else. He's like, that's the point. I'm sick of all of it. He got sick of it. And so let's say there's 12 nice units there, right? That bring a lot of money in, or in the theater district. All of a sudden, poof, gone. And he's like, I understand I can't rent it out for the next however many years. I'm okay with that because you're a pain in the ass. So the guy didn't even leave. He just turned the light out and said, no more renting in this space. And how many of those can you guys withstand before all of a sudden it's a real problem? Or that entrepreneur that buys an old strip mall and says, I'm going to build a multiplex here and put a bunch of housing in. And you're like, yeah, but you can only charge this much for rent. Like, oh, well, you know what? Never mind. I'll just, refurbish the strip mall.
Yes. Well, Santa Cruz, a couple of years ago, they got enough signatures to put rent control on for a ballot initiative. And the residents actually voted it down.
Yeah.
I mean, Santa Cruz is going to be super liberal. And I was thinking like, oh, that's going to pass. But the residents had seen how bad it is in San Francisco and how crowded Santa Cruz has become because of San Francisco's astronomical housing prices. And Santa Cruz said, no, we don't want it. It didn't pass. I mean, it was shocking. So,
I've got family in Santa Cruz and Capitola. It's really interesting. And Berkeley suffers from this too. And it must, all of these things seem easy when you talk about they oughta, right? And so when you see Santa Cruz works in contrary benefit to the city of Santa Cruz, city of Capitola, and they're like, no, we are going to add another 5,000 students this year on top of the 5,000 we added on top of it. And you're like, no, you're capped. Because as you know, Santa Cruz is clawing onto the side of the mountain on the edge of the ocean.
Yeah.
And you're in real estate, so you understand this. There are homes in Capitola, and this is no shit, this is real, where the easement are two roofs going like this. And you're not going to get these people. So this is when they are conservative, even if they're hyper left. They're like, I love my town. I don't want it to be bigger. I don't want to knock down my house and bigger plex because I got this wonderful little beach bunk, whatever it's going to be. They don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. Also, by the way, they'll say, we don't have enough water. And in California, it's very hard to put pipeline over a mountain and everything else. You have these compounding problems. And you see Santa Cruz is like, and some more students because they're incented to grow. Berkeley's the same way, where UC Berkeley works contrary to the city of Berkeley. And city of Berkeley has a huge problem. We're going to get back to Vegas here in a second, where they don't have enough permitting and inspection capacity. And then you have the residents that are, I always say Berkeley's the most tolerant place in the world. And so they won't tolerate too much government incursion into their stuff. And all of a sudden, it's like the political spectrum bends and it touches, and you're like, oh my God, these two lesbians are hyper conservative. They don't want the government in their business, And the city's like, we don't want to be in their business either because that's going to cause lawsuits. I've had conversations with people about this. And so it's very, very hard to deal with things. And then you have lawsuits and the lawfare. You guys seem to escape that, but maybe I'm wrong in that. I mean, the challenges in California, we're so ossified and on the left, that we don't get anything done, and we become this conservative, even though we're liberal, we become this conservative place where nothing can change. Like, we can't build a train. We're talking about this bullet train out to Las Vegas. You gotta be kidding me. Come on. That thing's going to get drawn out and it'll be billions of dollars over budget. It's not real. So do you guys have that kind of a problem? I know like the monorail has never thrived and now is going to die, but how do you guys deal with those complexities within the game of policy where it's like, you know what, we can't actually fix this problem. We can ameliorate maybe, but there's some problems that just become impossible. Are you on mute? All right, I don't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah. Okay.
There you go. It's funny when you talk about California because I left there at 18 and I went to Alabama. And I went to school at Auburn University in the Deep South. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was a huge culture shock. But then after a year of living in Alabama, I realized California says, oh, we're super free. We're very tolerant. We accept everybody, but this is the only way to live. Everybody else has it wrong. And I started to look and see in Alabama, they have a lot more freedoms in certain areas than we do in California. And then I traveled to Europe. And I'm just so excited to be in Italy and eating this amazing food and having this amazing wine and meeting some amazing people. And every time I heard somebody complain about the culture, it started to become a joke, but I was right 100% of the time. I could turn around and I'm like, are you from California? And they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, because you're the only people complaining about this very country that you are a visitor in. Every single time, Californians were very critical about anybody that wasn't Californian, that wasn't part of California, the California way. And so it has become the most tolerant state that I've ever had to deal with. Vegas, we're not going to have. It's just not. We can't have that culture here because we have so many different types of people coming from various parts of the United States, and they're constantly moving in and out. And it is very concentrated. Like California has been able to spread out for a majority of that state up and down the coast, right? And then inland to a certain degree outside of Death Valley. But Vegas, you don't have that. Like there are parts of that state, and I've gotten the privilege of driving through them where there is nothing. Just nothing. And there's probably not going to be anything. And so you get very concentrated, but there's not a lot of people that are from Nevada.
Yeah.
And being from Nevada is not people are proud of it, but it's not like in California where you wear it as this, it's your whole sense of identity. It's a very different culture.
Yeah. There's a couple things I want to say about that. One is in Vegas when I lived there, there was a Steelers bar, there was a Phillies bar, not the same place. There was all these, there's these communities, and I used to love to go to the Crown and Anchor. And if you were talking about European soccer, man, that place would be filled up if the right team was playing. And so there is that automatic diversity because people choose to come to Vegas. They're a certain kind of person, but they come from a lot of different places. And the other thing, and because I travel a good bit too, is I realized, and people in Alabama don't want sidewalks everywhere. They don't want to pay for it. They'll drive their golf cart instead. They just don't want to have it, and they don't have to. When you leave California, we look down on the South here in California. They're backwards, they're stupid, all that. Like that's just a thing that we do, and look down on other areas. When you leave California, California becomes the South to everybody else. Yeah, and you're right. We stand out, and they're like, my friends told me, how do you live there? Ugh, like it's disgusting to them. And like my friends from the military, they'll say, do you carry a gun everywhere you go? And I'm like, I don't carry a gun ever. It's just not like that, right? But these perceptions, I guess, are deserved, and we, just as much as we have perceptions about a lot of different places and they're not all that accurate, here we are having them. So it is very interesting. And I love that you saw that thing where we are an tolerant people. And it's a conundrum.
It is. Well, I mean, when I lived there, look, I've always been a conservative. My parents were conservative. It was okay in the 70s
Mhm.
and the 80s and the early 90s to be
Sure.
conservative. And then I go to Alabama and I come back 10 years later, and all of a sudden, I have to be it has to be a secret that I'm a conservative.
Don't talk about it. Right.
I won't
Right.
have
Yeah.
friends, right?
Yeah.
Like it is a cult.
Yeah. Dogs. That's all right. That's all right.
So, I wouldn't have friends. So I was like, oh, well, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm a socially liberal, right? I'm more of a
Yeah.
libertarian. Like I had to explain it. Gosh, that was so loud. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Well,
I
let's
have
do this.
someone
Let's
here
just,
at that house.
yeah, let's wrap it up because your dogs are done. And we've had such a great conversation. And I'm going to put you on mute while we do this. We've had such a great conversation, and I really appreciate you. And when people like on X, when they jump on someone and call them stupid and all these other, I'm like, nah, you know what? That's bullshit. I want to talk to this person and see what they're about because we're never as simple as everybody wants us to be. And so I appreciate you for standing up and speaking out and talking with me and taking all my crazy questions. It means a lot. And I think it says a lot about the greatness of how our country is and how healthy we are and that we can have an open conversation. And I don't think you said anything crazy. I might disagree with some of it. You're going to disagree with some of what I said, but we can all deal with that. So I think it's a great illustration of what's possible if we just kind of be a little less precious with ourselves and be a little more precious with who you are and how you're doing and the role you play in your community. And anybody who serves in Congress in any form or fashion is doing something. Maybe at the federal level, it's a little more lucrative, but you're doing this at cost to yourself, and I appreciate that. So from everybody here who follows the show, I thank you. What do you want to say in closing before we wrap it up?
Am I unmuted now?
No, you're unmuted. Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, the dog's finally calmed down. So I just appreciate you reaching out. I mean, that was a really crazy time on Twitter for me that week. You don't know when a video is going to go viral, and that one went viral. I had 2 million impressions in 2 days, and there was
Yeah, it's
a
crazy.
lot of hate and a lot of things. People saying a lot of nasty things, and it's like, look, we're human. We misspeak. We misunderstand things. Like I never claim that I understand every aspect of my government, and it's
Right.
not reasonable to expect somebody to have that total understanding. So I appreciate you reaching out and giving me the time and an opportunity to be able to have like an open dialogue and conversation. And that's one of the things I love is I love having people around me that don't agree with me and are willing to have a conversation. And I'm actually known in Carson for being one of the few legislators that has an open door policy. I will hear anybody out. I will tell you, nope, don't agree with it, or this part I will agree with, and this part I can't. And so I'm sort of a breath of fresh air up there because a lot of legislators run away from having disagreements. And so I like the dialogue. I don't like being in an echo chamber, and I like being challenged. And sometimes it changes my viewpoint, and sometimes I have an opportunity to change somebody else's. So I think this is great what you're doing. Again, thank you so much for bringing me out here or bringing me on here to have this conversation. And just, I encourage you to keep doing it because we need to teach everybody to have respectful dialogue.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me run these credits. I'll say goodbye to you in a sec.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.